Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking what is honestly one of the most fascinating corporate dramas of the modern tech era. We are breaking down Google's dramatic, highly public loss of its artificial intelligence crown and its massive, structurally brilliant comeback in the AI wars. We're going to see exactly how the company that effectively kickstarted the AI revolution almost lost it entirely, and how they leveraged their immense underlying infrastructure to quietly take the lead right back. To really grasp the scale of this comeback, we have to start at absolute rock bottom, $100 billion. Think about that for a second. In early 2023, Google introduced its new AI chatbot, Bard, to the world with a promotional tweet. And in that very first demo, the AI got a basic fact wrong. Well, the market's reaction was brutal and instantaneous. Alphabet, Google's parent company, saw its stock plummet 7.7% the very next day. They wiped out $100 billion in market value in a single afternoon. It was a massive wake-up call. But the roots of this failure, they actually go back a full decade.
Running through the timeline really frames the initial tragedy of Google's hubris here. Back in 2014, Google was quietly hoarding the greatest AI talent on Earth, which included acquiring the London-based lab DeepMind. Then, in 2017, the researchers published a 15-page paper called Attention is All You Need. They literally invented the transformer architecture, the fundamental tech powering literally all modern AI today. But then we hit 2020. An internal engineer named Noam Shazir built a functioning chatbot prototype called Mina, a full 2 years before ChatGPT. He pleaded with management to release it, completely convinced it could generate trillions in revenue. But management, they said no, and just shelved it. So by the time OpenAI launched ChatGPT in 2022 to world-changing fanfare, Google was completely caught flat-footed, despite having invented the exact technology powering it. And that hesitation, it resulted in a massive, massive fallout. Ilya Polosukhin, one of the co-authors of that breakthrough transformer paper, perfectly captured the internal frustration, noting that Google doesn't move unless it's a billion-dollar business. Because Google treated their world-changing invention like just another academic research paper, they suffered a devastating talent drain. Over the next 6 years, all 8 authors of that groundbreaking paper left Google. They literally walked right out the door to build rivals like OpenAI and Anthropic, raising billions of dollars to compete directly with the company that originally brought them together.
Part 1. The Code Red. The 800-pound gorilla stumbles.
So by December 2022, mere weeks after ChatGPT launched, Google management panicked. They issued a company-wide code red and even brought founders Larry Page and Sergey Brin back to active duty just to fight this existential threat. The stakes had never been higher, and Microsoft's CEO Satya Nadella really drove that home, bragging that he wanted people to know Microsoft made Google dance. In February 2023, Microsoft had launched an AI-powered version of Bing built right on OpenAI's technology. For the first time in 13 years, Google search faced a legitimate, terrifying threat. Microsoft really felt they had Google cornered. And for a while, it really looked like they did. In their absolute rush to catch up, things got messy. Bard hallucinated facts about the James Webb Telescope right out of the gate. When they rebranded to Gemini, its highly anticipated image generator started producing completely historically inaccurate images of 1943 soldiers, forcing Google to pull the plug on the feature in just 2 days. Later on, their AI Overviews feature literally told users to eat rocks and use glue to keep cheese on their pizza. It was a complete PR nightmare. But beneath all these highly public, embarrassing missteps, something entirely different was shifting internally.
Part 2. Rebuilding DeepMind, the Manhattan Project of AI.
So the absolutely crucial point here is how Google responded structurally. In April 2023, Google CEO Sundar Pichai made a massive fundamental shift. He took Google's 2 competing AI labs, Google Brain and DeepMind, which had essentially spent years fighting each other for resources, and merged them into one unified force under Demis Hassabis. Hassabis immediately instituted a ruthless, product-driven restructuring. He assigned grand challenges, flooded resources to the projects that actually worked, and completely killed off what didn't. He broke down all the academic silos and turned this unified Google DeepMind into a hyper-efficient machine aimed directly at consumer products. It was like the Manhattan Project for AI. But to lead this massive new machine, they needed their visionary back. Remember Noam Shazir, the engineer who built the Mina chatbot back in 2020 and left in total frustration? Well, think about what it cost to get him back. $2.7 billion. Google paid the staggering sum, disguised as a licensing deal with his startup, Character AI, just to bring Shazir back to lead the Gemini project. The company finally recognized that their past hesitation was costly, and they were willing to pay literally billions of dollars to fix it. Part 3. The full-stack advantage, owning the infrastructure. Now, let's dive into the technical core of why this matters so much. While competitors were out there focusing entirely on building better software, Google was leveraging a profound structural dominance. Consider the industry standard. Most competitors rely almost entirely on NVIDIA for chips and third parties for cloud computing. But Google operates on a completely different level. They train their models on chips they design themselves, their proprietary 6th-generation TPUs. These chips use roughly half the energy of NVIDIA's equivalents, which drastically reduces Google's dependency and totally slashes their training costs. Let's break down exactly what that means across the whole industry. Take OpenAI and Meta. They are incredible innovators, absolutely. But fundamentally, they're renters. They rent their chips from NVIDIA. And in OpenAI's case, they rent their cloud from Microsoft. Now look at Google's full-stack approach. They produce their own proprietary TPUs, they own the Google Cloud, and most importantly, they own the distribution pipelines. With Search and Android, they reach billions of users instantly. This vertical integration creates an unassailable, self-sustaining ecosystem. They own the entire stack, right from the silicon chips up to the smartphone screen in your pocket. Part 4. Reclaiming the Crown, the November 2025 breakthrough.
And this brilliantly illustrates how all of that underlying infrastructure and restructuring finally culminated in a massive turning point. When Google released Gemini 3, their hardware advantage finally translated into undeniable software dominance. The benchmarks were wild. Gemini 3 shattered the 1500 ELO barrier on the humanities reasoning benchmark, a test literally designed for PhD-level reasoning. It outscored GPT-5 and outscored Claude. It set the highest score ever recorded. The threat was so severe that OpenAI CEO Sam Altman actually had to declare his own internal code red, the exact same term Google had used 3 years prior. The tables had completely turned.
But look, having the best model is really only half the battle. Distributing it is the other half. And because Google owns that massive ecosystem we talked about, they rolled Gemini out instantly. AI Overviews hit 2 billion monthly users. Their image generator, famously codenamed Nano Banana, actually overtook Midjourney in realism. Their video model, VO3, dominated the industry. And the absolute ultimate victory? Apple chose Gemini to power the next generation of Siri. Think about that. Apple needed a partner that could handle hundreds of millions of users without running out of hardware or money, and literally only Google had the infrastructure to guarantee that kind of scale. Which brings us to the financial reality. $400 billion. By early 2026, Alphabet crossed the staggering figure in annual revenue, all while maintaining incredible 31% profit margins. For years, investors and skeptics questioned whether Google's massive spending on AI infrastructure would ever actually pay off. Well, this number proved them unequivocally wrong. Because they own their own chips and cloud, they don't have to pay that massive infrastructure tax to NVIDIA or Microsoft that their competitors do. Google wasn't just surviving the AI war anymore. They were monetizing it at a scale no one else could even match. It really is a remarkable full-circle story. The entire race started with a 15-page paper written by 8 Google researchers. And 9 years later, Google is still setting the pace. And the deep, wild irony here? Their biggest rivals are still using Google's transformer invention to build their models. Yet those same rivals are effectively paying Google to rent the cloud space and the chips needed just to stay in the race. Which leaves us with this final provocative thought to take away from our explainer today. As this technology continues to evolve at an absolute breakneck pace, you really have to ask yourself, in the long run of the AI race, will the ultimate winner be the company that codes the best software or the company that owns the tracks? Thanks for joining me to break this all down. Keep learning, and I'll see you in the next one.